Welcome to Daily Armour. Today we're going to be in John chapter 13 looking at verse number 7, and we'll be looking at some other verses around it, but I want to start with verse number 7, and it says, Jesus answered and said unto him was Peter, he was talking to Peter, what I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. He's telling Peter, he's like, what I'm doing, you don't understand. You're not going to understand what he was doing right at that moment. But he was also referring to some things that were fixing to take place. And we know that based on verse number 1, based on verse number 3, we know the scriptures letting us know what was on the mind of Christ during this time. Now, this is when he was washing the disciples' feet, and they're just shocked by what he's doing, and it's not making any sense. I don't know if you're like me, and I have absolutely been shocked at what God had planned, what God instigated, what God did in my life. It didn't make any sense. As I am, Monday will be my 30th wedding anniversary, and as I look back over the last 30 years of marriage, which I'm like, I can't believe I've been married for 30 years, I look back and I see so many things that God has done and God has taken us. Even in the move, and now it's been, I guess, close to 15 years ago that he had moved us from North Carolina to Florida, and it still shocks me. It still amazes me sometimes that he did that. And I can look back. So often we can look back and we can see some little nuggets in there of why God did what he did, of what he was doing. And even though we don't fully grasp all of it, we know that when we are trusting in what he wants and in his plan, even when it doesn't make sense, I know that's why that verse, and I've shared this before, Proverbs 3:5-7, trust not. I just had to go back to that constantly, just over and over and over again. Lean not unto thine own understanding. Trust not myself. I wasn't to trust myself, but I was trusting the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not unto thine own understanding. I had to not just know that verse, not just memorize that verse, but I had to experience that verse. And as we know what's fixing to take place, I put myself in the shoes of the disciples because they are not aware yet of what's fixing to take place. And it breaks my heart. Even knowing that this has such a much bigger purpose, in that moment that they're experiencing this, it is horrific. It is horrible. It is difficult. It is heartbreaking. Even when he's doing this, which seems like such a wonderful blessing, it is, but it seems wrong to accept this kind of a blessing from our Lord, from our Master, from our Savior, from our Creator. He shouldn't be washing our feet. The disciples, he shouldn't be washing their feet. He's like, none of this is going to make sense. Not what I'm doing right now, and not what is fixing to take place in these few short days to come. Not what is fixing to take place. Go back to verse number 1. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew, Jesus is aware of some things. God knows some things, and we don't know them. We are not aware of them. We can look back and see some things, but we're not aware of the plan. We're not aware of all of how everything connects, how we're connected to so many others, and even people that maybe we haven't even met yet, but we're all connected. Jesus knows. It says, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father. See, when I read that, he knew he was fixing to leave them. He had only a few short, a small amount of time left with them, and he was going to be separated from them. And he was going to be separated to on this, he was going to be taken. He was going to be arrested. He was going to, go through all this. He was going to be separated from them physically. And then he was going to be separated from them through death. And that was going to even be more difficult. It was even going to be more heart-wrenching. They were fixing to go through such a heart-wrenching time in their life. You may be going through such a heart-wrenching time in your life. It may be something that you can't even comprehend, that you're just in shock, that you're just without words. Jesus knows. And we don't understand and we don't get it, but he does. And that's where I have to lean not into my own understanding, but I'm trusting in the Lord. I trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not into thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him. What I kept having to do. That's what I keep having to do. There are so many things, big and small, and I don't understand it. And sometimes it's in those things like this when he is blessing me. And I'm like, no, Lord, I can't accept this. No, Lord, this doesn't make any sense. No, Lord, this is too much. You've done too much for me and I can't accept this. And even when he was doing this for the disciples, he was going to wash their feet. And Peter was like, Lord, no, what are you doing? This doesn't make any sense. You're our master. What he was saying was, Lord, I don't deserve you to do this. This makes me uncomfortable. This is more than I can comprehend, even when it's in those kind of circumstances. And there's all kinds of circumstances out there. Even in those circumstances, it's for a reason, it's for a purpose. We're gonna learn that he was gonna teach them. I'm leading you by example. I'm teaching you by example. I'm showing you what I want you to do for others. I'm showing you how I want you to treat one another. I'm showing you what you're going to need to know a little bit later. And I know it doesn't make any sense now. And him going to the cross, him being separated from them, it's not going to make any sense. Their hearts are going to be torn. They're going to be broken. Those circumstances, they don't make sense. But Jesus knows. Jesus knows. Verse number 2, and supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. Verse number 3, Jesus knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand and that he was come from God and went to God. See, that's on his mind. He knows it's time. Verse number 1 says, Jesus knew that his hour was come. Verse number 3, Jesus knowing that the Father had given him all things into his hands and that he was come from God and went to God. He is fixing to go to God. It was going to happen in just days. He's leaving. This is not going to make any sense. This is going to boggle the mind. This is going to be heart-wrenching. But we know looking back, the disciples knew looking back, that he had to go to the cross because we couldn't make an atonement for our sin. The blood had to be shed and it had to be perfect, spotless. It had to be a spotless sacrifice. And Jesus was the only one qualified to do that because Jesus is God and God is perfect. And God became man so he could be the sacrifice for the sins of mankind. That's me and that's you and that's all of us. And as I'm reading this, he knew that it was time. He knew what they were fixing to experience. He's even looking past those days in verse number 7. He's looking past that because here he's pouring out the water in verse number 5 and a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. He's washing their feet. Sometimes he cleans me up and sometimes he does something for me and it just shocks me and it amazes me and I feel overwhelmed and so unworthy, and I am unworthy, but I'm his child. And he knows how to bless me, and he knows how to help me, and he knows how to comfort me when I'm going to go through those times of this heart-wrenching agony. And he knows how to help me, and he knows how to love on me, and he does it perfectly. He does it perfectly. And he leads by example, and he shows me that I don't just keep all the blessings for myself, but I'm to share them with others. I'm to pay it forward. I'm to look to his example, and I'm to do unto others. To do unto others, not as I've been done by others, but as Christ has loved me. I'm to love others that way. I'm going to go back to verse number 7. Jesus answered and said unto him, talking to Peter, what I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. I looked up that word do, and I loved the word. We know what, when Jesus said, what I do, thou knowest not. What I do, what he's doing. What he's doing is not going to make any sense. What he is doing is, they don't get it. And he knows that. And that's okay. They're going to understand later. And he tells them that. You're going to understand when you look back. You're going to understand later. But when I'm thinking about that word do, when he does some things, and I looked up that word, and it gave a whole list of descriptions of the word do. And I loved, I just want to read out a bunch of them, and just, you grasp hold of something that maybe stands out to you. When what I do, this is what Jesus is doing. What are some kinds of things that he does? He abides. He agrees. He appoints. He bears. He had to bear that cross. He bore that cross to bring us salvation. Cast, calls, commit, execute. He executes some things. He exercises some things. He was giving it as an example of some things he wants us to do. Give, have, keep. Lighten the ship. I loved that. God himself, Jesus himself, he knows how to lighten the ship. And sometimes we were like, no, we got to keep it. And he's like, no, we're going to chuck it out. We're going to chuck it out because it's weighing you down. The ship's laying low in the water, and I'm going to lighten your load. And he knows how to lighten our load. And he does it in all kinds of ways that just kind of blows our mind. He knows how to lighten the load, and he knows when to do it. He knows how to do it, and he knows when to do it. I love that definition. I'm like, what an odd thing to put in this biblical definition. But Jesus knows how to lighten the load. He knows how to provide. He knows how to perform. He has purpose in what he's doing. He knows how to take. He knows how to tarry. Sometimes it seems like it's too late. He's tarrying for a reason, for a purpose. He has a plan, and his timing is always right. Something I prayed this morning, Lord, I am watching for your cue. I am waiting on your word. I don't want to make a move without it. And Lord, it just, I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting, but just because you're tarrying doesn't mean that you're not aware, doesn't mean that you're not going to intervene, doesn't mean that it means that I'm just to wait for it. And you are doing some things even when you tarry, you're doing some things. He's working. There's some things that he's yielding to. He's when you look back, you can see some things that he was doing, that he was causing, that all of these things that he does, we don't get it, but he knows, and he's aware, and my trust is in him. All my hope is in Jesus. My trust is in him. Trust in the Lord, not in your circumstances, not in yourself, not in your emotions. By no means don't trust in your emotions. You can be up, you can be down, you can be everywhere in between. I don't trust in any of that. I trust in God. I trust in Jesus. Back to verse number 7. What I do, we talked about what all kinds of things that he can do in our lives. Thou knowest not, but thou shalt know hereafter. Thou shalt know hereafter. That word hereafter means when you look back. So when you look, go ahead and look back. Look back on some things, because it's going to help you with what you're going through right now. Look back on some things. Look back. Go to that memory book. Look back at some things, how God's intervened in the past, how God's come through. And even when it seemed like he was late, he was tarrying and he was doing it on purpose. I mean, there was one thing I prayed about for 12 years. I prayed about it for such a long time. And boom, a phone call. And everything was different. And I was like shocked. And it was over. It was as if, gosh, it was amazing. And he did that. He tarries for a reason. He provides his way for a reason. He lightens the ship. Sometimes we have to chuck some things out. Sometimes we have to get rid of some things. He's lightening the load. He knows that we've got some rough seas ahead and we need to lighten that load. And he knows what he's doing. And even though things in life don't make any sense, he knows, and he's got it under control. And all my responsibility is just to go lead by example, his example, not my example, his example, and do it. What did he do here? He said, Jesus said, verse number 10, Jesus saith to him, he that washeth needeth not to save washing his feet, but is clean every whit, and ye are clean, but not all. He knows who was there for the right reasons and who was clouded by, you know what Judas's problem was? He didn't understand. He didn't get it, and he started resenting that. He started having a bad attitude about it. He started having all these expectations. He was let down. And instead of just waiting and to see what God really does have planned, he got bitter. He got bitter. And in that moment of bitterness, he made horrible mistakes. And could he have been forgiven? Yes, he could have been forgiven. But he chose not to. Please don't choose that. Please don't choose that. No matter what is going on in your life, choose forgiveness. Choose God's free gift of forgiveness. He wants to wash us all over, but then after we are washed, and sometimes those feet need to be cleaned up. Sometimes we need to just wash those dirty parts. Verse number 12, I want you to notice that Jesus asked, know ye what I have done to you? He says, you call me Master and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that ye should do as I have done to you. Ye should do as I have done to you. We are to do for others as Christ has done for us. We are to help. We are to be gracious. We are to give hope. We are to intervene. We are to pray. God prayed for me. Jesus prayed for me. He prayed for you. He said, Lord, I don't just pray for these that you've given me, but I pray for those that you shall. Those that shall believe. Those that shall believe without even seeing. I was the one. I believed without seeing him physically. But I feel like I have seen him physically. I feel like I have met him physically. I know Jesus. I don't just know about him. I don't just know some facts about him. I know him. He lives within me, and I love him. And even though my love for him is so imperfect and is so flawed, and I make so many mistakes, his love for me is perfect, and he knows what he's doing. And he gives me such an example. Verse number 15, for I have given you an example that ye should do as I have done unto you. Verily I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. If ye know these things, happy are ye if you do them. How are we to be happy? What's going to make me happy? What's going to make you happy? When we do what God has told us to do, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's overwhelming, even if it's heart-wrenching, even if it's so much joy that you can't even comprehend. We're to do to others. Help them, pray for them through their grief. Help them, intervene for them through prayer, actually sacrifice. You may have to sacrifice some things. Maybe that the Lord will lead you to do something and you have to give up something in your life. He's going to lighten that load. He's lightened that load for you. He wants to lighten that load for somebody else. And He's going to use me and He's going to use you to do it. And He's left us a wonderful example. And they experienced it, and we get to read it in His Word. And I know it doesn't make sense, but He's got it all under control. He's got the plan. He knows what He's doing. I didn't take a blind leap of faith when I accepted Christ. I knew that everything I was doing wasn't getting me to heaven, that I had to come to that place where I saw my need, where I spiritually heard the Lord say, you're just a believer, even the devil let him misbelieve, and you need to be saved. And I had to accept His free gift. He's saying, you can't go to church enough, you can't get involved enough, you can't read your Bible enough, you can't pray enough, you can't do it. But He already did. And He was doing that for me, and He was doing that for you, and He was doing that for them, and they didn't understand it, and they didn't get it, but they were going to be able to look back, and they were going to be able to see, and you're going to be able to look back, and I'm looking back. And as things are going on in my life now, and I've got some questions, Lord, and it doesn't really matter if my questions are answered. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to look back, and I'm going to know some things hereafter. And as whatever situation the Lord may be overwhelming you with something good, a blessing like the washing of the feet. It may be something heart-wrenching that you're going through, like what they were fixing to experience. Jesus was going to be arrested just a few hours after that. And that was going to just the beginning of tearing their hearts out of their chest. And they were going to go through the most horrible experience of their life. But there was a reason, there was a purpose, and they weren't going to get it, and they weren't going to understand, but they can look back, and then they share that with others. Take that and share that with others. This is the example He's given. If ye know these things, happy are ye if ye do them. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again soon.